Hi there, Randy Green here, podcast 3. It is August 22nd, 2022. What I want to talk about today is the idea of coexistence within the same locality. In the previous podcast, I talked about how the enhanced humans of the realities around our pocket reality use the American Coast Guard ships to go to Antarctica and work there, what we could say as part of our reality without really being part of our reality. The question is, why not just take a craft and go under the or sub-oceanic and going that way? And they are doing that as well, but there is this coexistence principle that we must take into consideration. In podcast 1, I talked about the city here in Denmark where they exist among us under these domes, as well as I saw them in Australia too, and I saw the different technology that upholds their reality as part of our reality, which is it's kind of timeshare. Let us put it this way, it's kind of a timeshare apartment that they can come in and become part of our reality and work in within their own networks and their own configurations, but still be part of our reality and do what they need to do on the holographic level. So that means that the holographic features are present in our reality, in our pocket reality. It's what upholds it. So it's already there, the density energies are there. Again, as I always claimed, and I claim that in my progression work and my attempt to try and get us out of the frequency neural network limitations and get back into the original density layers of our perception field, which takes a lot of work because we need to work our way through 9 layers of the emotional field and clear that one out, especially if the body that you are having has a molecular structure that has been around for quite some time. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's a tendency to reuse the molecular blueprint in specific organic vessels because and I know this might offend some people, but I have it in my book, so it's not that it's a big secret. But 60% of the organic vessels on our planets are clones of the original blueprint that were behind, not the Neanderthal, but the molecular structure is definitely a derivative of the Neanderthal composition, which is why that type of organic vessel were created. But we're more talking about what we could say a re-engineering of some of the vessels that we have had in previous civilizations. So it is advanced, but at the same time it's also very primitive, more mammal, animal-like than actually human. Because if it were human, we would have consciousness units embedded into all of our molecules, into all of our DNA, which we haven't. We have electromagnetic energy instead. So that's kind of where we are. And I'm not going to have the discussion about animals here because that's a whole category in itself. Let us put it this way, from my perspective, the majority of animals on our planet are either a genetic experimentation, incubators of specific type of genetics, or as a type of, we have got some really nasty souls here, but we can't put them in human form because they will just destroy reality. So we create a predator instead, and then the soul will be captured there and it will wear out eventually and be contained within a hive mind structure run by cube systems. And then you say, well, we have a lot of cute animals, etc., etc. But let us just put it there and say, well, there are some that are under rehabilitation, such as the domestic animals, right? But in the times as they are now, they are having their own difficulty, let us put it this way, with the dark orbs. Let us just call them that. Okay, I'm not going to go more into that one because that's a whole... that's 10 classes on their own if you really are going to investigate the animal things, and that's not where I have my interest. So I know about it, but I don't know completely in a professional manner about it. So let us just keep it at that. But I want to do the coexisting, and there are different lines of thought here. First and foremost, I want to put in here when I talk about in the whole project new reality news and these kind of things, I talk about the Arcturians. And I just want to remind you that even though the Arcturians are now operating here from the 7th dimension in an android form, they're technically semi-organics. They used to be humans as part of either Mu, the continent of Mu, or Lemuria, all depending on how you put the pronunciation. And they took off and they went into another system. So, but there are also versions of them that comes from the future humanity of this type of reality that we have now. So that's also some of the question is, are they from the pocket humans that eventually will be released? And that has then traveled to the Arcturian system and then have come back from the future. Again, so we are having these discussions about not having linear time but spiral time and concentric circles of reality, which makes it difficult for us to grasp the concept of being in the outer domain and then travel or transform into the middle domain and then at some point come quote unquote back to the outer domain and take on physical form for reasons and purposes, clearing purposes, to get rid of whatever stuck there, because when a system begins to go into its devastation cycle, it's a good idea to clear everything out. That's why I'm here, and that's why I got trapped here. Okay, so even though I said, well, I haven't got my complete understanding of why I'm here, I know that's one of the things I came here to do. There are other things, but there has also been a lot of manipulation in my awakening process with what I'm actually here to do. That's kind of the mind games that are being played on us by the different groups that are here. When I talk about the enhanced humans and the other civilizations, I'm talking about the original civilizations of our solar system. I'm not talking about the Greys and the invading races from the 50s and from the conglomerate and blah, 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 and all of the ones that are showing their craft in the sky. I'm talking about the hidden people that are humans like you and me, so to speak, but of a different variety. Their DNA composition is different. They are vibrating on a different level, and that's why we can't see them. They have interest in our pocket, historical reasons, research reasons, industrial reasons, trade reasons, political reasons, quarantine reasons. The fact that it has been used as a drop zone for the Dracos when they were here and hijacking our system, and we're taking part of that one, you can say, how does that match with these different types of enhanced humans around us? That is, that the Dracos exist in their pocket reality, which is also pocket reality spheres within spheres. They exist in another, but they can work together if necessary, which we have seen. And that we have engineered humans that carry a high portion of what we would call Draco DNA or reptilian DNA, and they are also part of this reality as the representatives of what used to be the Draco races, but are now just the scavengers, because the Dracos, in my understanding, has left the perimeter, so to speak. There was a regime shift that led to the Dracos. It's just what I know, could be wrong, but what I know, the king of that group of Dracos that used to be humans as part of our quadrant had been in stasis for a long time, and he had created a version of himself that were more suitable to deal with the dealings, as it were, but the genome that were put in there were flawed, and therefore the prince, quote unquote, began to go in a different direction than the original replicate was set to, due to the flaws in the genome. Anyway, so it became an entity in itself and began to work in different manner than the original intention was, and because of that, the king was awoken, and he decided to take off the table the alliances and the things that his replicate had done in his absence. Anyways, it's a long story. So that's cleared up some of the things, and that's from my point of view why the Dracos are no longer here, including that some of these very ancient beings, when they go into stasis and have a replicate instead, then all depending on how long these replicates are functioning, they have a tendency to break down. So they have to wake up at some point and look at the replicate and say, yeah, you're not working as you're supposed to. And then things have to be cleared out, and the mess has to be cleared up. Anyways, that's just another random piece of information that for many of you doesn't matter much. But it did matter in terms of when I was in Australia, because I felt the shift when I was down there. Not the first time I was there between 16 and 17, but later on when I came back in autumn 17, that's where there was things shifted. But that was because the prince, quote unquote, of the Dracos aligned with the Orion conglomerate, and by that, or the Omicron races, and by that instigated something different that violated the original agreements that were made with the elder councils of the hijacking races that were in control of this pocket reality that has now become what we would call similar to the TV show with the island, where we are living in a holographic reality, but we are actually, it's a type of imprisonment. But that's not where I wanted to go. Again, random information. It's kind of, give me one word of something and something else pops up. So regarding the Arcturians, used to be human civilizations. Dracos used to be humans, regressed into what they are today. Different reasons and purposes, not going to go down that alley. But what I want to focus on is this sharing of the same location. And we know from Michael Newton's books about these different, quote unquote, call themselves souls, which they're not. If you kind of, he was regressing people similarly as Dolores Cannon. If you read their books, I recommend reading the books and not to just do the lectures on YouTube, because I tried to look a little bit into what I could find of Dolores Cannon. She's more or less saying the same thing, but the book shows this, where she puts people into hypnosis and put them probably into a theta state, where she then contacts or get in contact with the superconscious. And Michael Newton did the same. And what is said there is very similar. It's kind of, we have this advanced civilization that is part of our reality, that coexist with us, that are also being part of our human vessels. Whether it is portions of who and what people used to be, as in kind of that's their different configurations that are then coming to life, which in a way could make sense. But why is it there and not actively part of the physical form? And if you read Dolores Cannon's books, the Convoluted Universe, I'm just going through book 1, it is clear that these entities have no interest in actually activating the different people. They keep saying, and they said the same thing to me, it's always said, when you're ready, you need to be ready. If you activate too soon, the molecular state, the infection that is in your molecular state will go off, and you have no idea how dangerous you are. That was what I got. And in my awakening process, I've had this whenever, on the 20th, before I had the full vision, I always had the voice in my head, are you ready to go move on? Are you ready to continue the work? And I always said, yes, I am. And at some point, I remember asking them, what are you, discarnate, or what are you? And they kind of said to me, well, isn't it kind of the same thing, whether or not you inform or not inform? In a way, we're all ghosts. In a way, something like that. It was just a whole playing with me within my concepts of ideas, and not really revealing to me what was actually going on until later on, when it became possible to use my field to manifest themselves as in an entity I actually could see. And as I have expanded my perception field, then it's easier for them to join the different rings of my perception field. If they're in the 7th layer, they can present themselves in the 7th layer, because my perception field has the same density variations as our reality field. So that's how we can walk in and out of each other once we get our energy system up and running. So there is both the coexisting, where we can take part of a physical form, so to speak. They can, if they like, put in a symbol, then they can manifest themselves inside our field, which I feel, and I get enormously tired when they do so. And I don't appreciate it, because it's a misuse of my energy. So that's a kind of coexisting, especially the ones that are what we call orb-like and don't have a form inside this reality. So they can do that. Anyways, there are many different ways of how they can communicate with us telepathically, here I want to focus on the organics and not the unorganics, but the organics that are existing in the adjacent realities, why they coexist with us, why they are here operating inside this reality. And the first time I was in Australia, there was this, there's always greys involved in this somehow, because the greys are being the little servants of all of these different races, because they can cross between the different dimensional settings. They can operate inside this reality, but also in the fourth dimension. They have this cross reality in the artificial fourth dimension, where they can operate at the bidding of the different groups, so they don't have to be in direct contact with us. So that's, in my perspective, why these little greys are doing what they are doing. I was at the beach at Balmoral, where I was sitting there just looking randomly on the different people and the different groups. When I went to Australia, I got in contact with a group that call themselves the 7Ds, and they are partially Arcturians, but are part of a group that tried to get their footing into Australia by different types of hybrid projects that were less invasive, as they put it, as for instance some of the military hybrid projects that's been going on in America, for instance, as well as in Britain. That's kind of a little bit of a horror show, some of these really negative aliens that have been part of these military projects in trading off technology to inside this reality humans, which then also have been upgraded to be able to operate this technology. So that's both an upgrading genetically speaking, but also having access to some really tool toys, so to speak, which if you are a colonel or some kind of gone rogue military personnel sort of being or a human, and you kind of invest yourself into these programs, similarly as the X-Files, right? Secret organization, the elite, the cover-up, what Stephen Greer has been working with. So that's covered there. We don't need to go in there. You want to know more about that? Richard Dolan, Stephen Greer, the first bunch of the UFO researchers, they have looked into that one. The next wave looked into the abductions, looked into the grays from the different android worlds that came in and have been using our vessels to create a new organic form. So that's the second wave. So we are now in the third wave, where we're beginning to say, okay, we have also on our planet actually advanced humans. Our reality is not what we think it is. So now it's time to look into the dynamics of our reality, of the locality that we actually exist in, and not just focusing on what we could say the extraterrestrials as something out there, and look in and say, okay, who are we? What is this? Or what is this world we actually a part of? And how do we operate as human change makers to become part of these realities? And what are at stake to prevent us from getting access to these realities? And how do we operate in a manner so that we can develop ourselves as a first step out of the pocket? Because that's where I'm going with this one, having these discussions, so we kind of get a mindset where we focus on where we want to go, because intent has a very large role in our way our mind work. If we put our mind onto something, you know what I'm saying here, when you focus on something, we give it energy, it's easier for your energy system to begin to pull in what it needs of information or code streams to align with your intent. Not as in a course of miracle for greed and materialistic gains and whatever. We're talking consciousness development potentials here. So that's something completely different. But intent has a huge role in this one once you have activated your transformative energy system. There you can really begin to point your focused mind field with the third eye, so to speak, when you really look at things with your eyes and with your mind's eye, and you really expand your perception field into that understanding of, I want to connect to these code streams, I want to connect to that information system, so I can build that pattern into my mind field from where I will radiate a specific type of holographic energy that will activate my holographic energy units in a specific manner, so my vibrational field can begin to attract the knowledge I need to continue that building process, including if we are on the right track of the original world, so to speak, get in contact with some of the access to the libraries or access to the more complex holographic teaching systems. All constructions under the ancient ones are composed of. They hold these information stations you can contact and get connected to, so you get what you need of information. Similarly, as a computer or the internet, just advanced crystal technology, if you want to put it that way. Okay, so Balmoral Beach, sitting there looking, and then I got this information telepathically. They were showing me the different genetic compositions of their human experimentation to try and create a new type of race that would align with the 70s. It's all about these groups that comes from other realities where they have messed up their own worlds. They want to become part of our world. And the pocket is where our pocket reality, the quarantine zone, is where they get allowance to do that, because it's fucked up anyway. So that's part of the screwed upness of what's going on here. They get allowance to get in here because it's so fucked up here and we have no clue. We're like guinea pigs, right? Like we are doing with we have humans inside this reality that are cloning animals and doing all sorts of stupid stuff. Scientists that are doing genetic experimentation that nobody knows of, but of course they have developed CRISPR into a completely, they probably already have little offlings going on, children that have been born already now completely genetically modified. We're just talking this human population, humans like you and me inside this reality, normal humans that have what we could say are descendants of some of the lineages of Atlantis, repeating their experiments as portions of their soul did back then, which were the mistake of reseeding them. It should just have been closed down and literally. But anyways, eternal soul potentials or consciousness units cannot be destroyed, unfortunately. So they repeat themselves. They keep playing out their content until they have no viability rate. So that can take many cycles, unfortunately. Okay, so I will show this. Which were the first time around, and then there were other stuff going on. At that time I was not clever enough to discern between good and bad. At that time I thought everything I encountered were good, because that's kind of what I had experienced in Denmark, right? In Denmark we don't have these we have now, but we didn't back then under the old world order groups. There are certain rules when we talk about the ancient civilizations of which I stem from, as kind of, yeah, this is how we do it. We play by the book, guys. There are limitations to how far we push it, but with the 1952 incoming races, they don't give shit. The scavengers under the reptilian races don't give shit. The insectoids under these groups and the androids don't give shit. So the game has changed. It has not. It's no longer kind of a rule set that we follow the rules of engagement, right? Now it's just everybody's battle to get whatever they want, running rampant inside this reality to get the types of genetics they need. So that's just, everything's just gone really south, and that allows for other groups to come into the laws of energetic and genetic affinity, and there are some really old levels of our molecular state that have been activated. Anyway, so that draws in, opens up the gate systems to these ancient civilizations, and what's left there in these pockets in the older grids of our reality are then being released into current humanity that has a genetic affinity with it, which is a drag for those of us who have a body that goes far back. And I'm saying it that way because my body's not mine, but I'm in it, so I have to deal with what it holds of information. As I said, there is a reuse of the different body templates, as I began with. So they are trying to re-engineer this so they can replicate it out of what is stored or connected to the old racial grid. So that's part of some of the things that they are doing here, what I was shown. So that's one thing. And then there are the science labs that are in the adjacent realities with humans like you and me in white lab coats, and similarly as if you go into a lab or laboratory that are having what you call guinea pigs or test animals, right? They're just using humans instead, and clones and replicates and or CRISPR children or whatever they're engineering, so they can test these different molecular states, so they can create a new type of human form that can exist inside this reality. Because even though I said with the whole depopulation, that's not their plan, because they don't need that to happen artificially, but there is definitely a program going on where they want to alter the enclosure we are part of tremendously. They're using the matrix of change. They're terraforming, they are changing the political systems, the medical systems, the sciences. They are changing what's going on inside this reality. And there is a trade-off going on with the different 1952 android races and their different affiliates to get something which we know, and I've talked about this, and it's again also important to understand that it's a very complex pattern of who is who and what is real and what is now artificial programs. And when we talk about the alien agenda, the way it expressed itself under the old world order, there were actually organic vessels involved, so to speak, real aliens. I would say what I'm experiencing now is 95% programs. So there are very few of them actively participating with humans anymore. They don't need that. They have got what they need. They got the holograms, they got the code streams, they got your genetic sequences. They don't need us anymore, so to speak. So that's the problem in a manner of speaking. And that's why many of the organic vessels as we're having now are just being shipped off to, insectoids. You have a field day or tourist or whatever. I'm dealing with things that are coming into my field and kind of, do this, do that, whatever. And kind of say, fuck off. I don't want to do this. And then they kind of say, it's boring. I say, yeah, well, you're welcome to fucking leave. And then they pull out of my field again. It's just kind of what kind of industry is actually going on here? Seriously? What do you think this is? Disneyland? Do you think I am Disneyland? Yeah, well, it feels sometimes like that. So there is a lot of stuff going on, and with people that are not consciously aware, they are just following all of these weird impulses, thinking, I want to do this, whatever. Anyway, so it is definitely for those of us who are trying to deal with this and battle it off and clear it out. And the ones I'm working with, we are not enjoying this whatsoever. Things are being psychotronically put into our minds via these programs where we kind of say, I would never, ever in my wildest subconscious shitload of fantasies come up with that. Which is, where did that come from? Seriously, there is some serious shit going on. Anyways, okay, I'm laughing about it. It's actually not that funny when you first begin to deal with these things, but I've been doing this work for 7 years now, so I have been dehumanized in that manner. I'm not, at some point you like soldiers at war that have the ability to deal with the traumas and are not succumbing to the trauma, or people that are working in really severe levels of our reality, because we know there are professional people around our planet as part of this human population that are dealing with stuff that most people would succumb under, but they have this special psyche where they deal with it in a humorous way to cope with it without it being suppression or anything, because we have just getting so used to what we're doing, understanding what it is, and then we do what we need to do, and we respond to it in a way that keeps our personality matrix intact, not suppressing it, not glossing it over, or not minimizing it, and just head on looking at things as they are. That's part of what it means to be a chaos pilot. You just deal with it as it is, find solutions, and then do whatever you can to clear it out and get rid of whatever that is, and heal and mend yourself when there are new experiences that comes as a shock and a little bit overwhelming. Take the time to heal, to mend, to do the psychological processes, to get it into the right boxes, to understand what happened, and evaluate and visualize how can I do better next time. Feeling quite aligned with the understanding I can cope with this. Because I've been through so much now, so I know I can cope with this. So how do I cope with this challenge? As in kind of, instead of shying away from the challenges, just going head on into whatever comes our way. And I know it's part of my who and what I am, because I already, when I was, how do you put it? When I was being licensed as a psychotherapist, I have to be careful with the words, because in Danish we say when I educated myself, but in American English that means that you are taking some unofficial course material. I was at a school becoming a psychotherapist, formal education, licensed, examined, all of these kind of things. But in the group sessions we were dealing with some of the things, and there were there was a girl there that had suffered from some really severe abuse, sexual abuse as a kid. And she decided that I would be the one that she would let the snippet of some of her anger just right in my face, and I was shocked all over. But the teacher, she said, well, she probably felt you had the capacity to contain her anger. And in a way, she probably was right, but it was very unpleasant, let me put it that way. And I kind of said, but yeah, rather not be that kind of person, because I really don't feel that I should take that anger. It's nothing to do with me, but it was very unpleasant. But anyways, these are the dynamics humans in between. Humans do weird stuff to each other, right? Especially if they have some pretty severe trauma in their personality matrix. They respond in mysterious ways, all depending on how stressed they get. Okay, so that Balmoral Beach was one thing, and then the reason why I said I didn't know what I was dealing with was because then after I got that, then I got the counterforce coming in, and they asked me to do stuff which, since I thought it was the same group, I didn't. I got involved in some clearing work of some of the grids I shouldn't have got in, because then my energy system began to get contaminated, and I didn't understand it at the time. So these are some of the stupidities that we are doing when we're learning to deal with this weird otherworldly reality settings that we are also part of inside this reality, as we awaken and become acquainted with the world as it actually is, and with the different types of realities that are connected to this pocket that we are, or quarantine zone that we are located into. The other one I want to put in here is when I came back in that must have been in March 2017. I came home in January 2017, stayed home for a couple of months, and then went back into Australia in spring 2017 and lived with another person, which became a dear friend of mine. And she and I went to I've talked about this experience before, because that's where I was not the only one experiencing it. She experienced it with me, which were very, very interesting. We went into Woolies, and as that's what's called, right? A type of supermarket, Walmart, Australian version of it. Forgot the name, doesn't matter. I'm not going to latch onto that one. But we went in to do our groceries, and we went in a different place than we normally did our groceries. And we came in, and again, there was this thickening of the molecular state of reality, as if it shifted. And it shifted very interesting, because I saw a dwarf female, which was not a dwarf. She was suffering from Down syndrome, and she had a son. And women that suffers from Down syndrome, as far as I know, don't get children, because they can't. But what do I know, right? Look it up on the internet. What do I know? She was there, the woman was there with Down syndrome with a son, and it was just kind of, my mind locked onto that one, thinking that's not possible. When you have Down syndrome, you can't have offspring. How can she have a son? Is she even suffering from Down syndrome? And if she's not, then what race is she? And that focus shifted the entire scenario around us. And my friend and I looked at each other, and she was looking around to begin with, and then she decided, I don't want to see this, and she just looked down into the what you call the trolley, or the carrier where you put your groceries into. And I kept looking, because I was fascinated with the people I saw there. They were all sorts of hybrids. They were humans, but they had very long legs, small torsos, facial features that were human but not really human, arms that were too long or too short. They were disproportionate. They were all sorts of human experiments living in an adjacent reality, sharing the supermarket with us in their version of it. Same locality. And they looked at us as in kind of, what are you doing here? And we looked at them, what are you doing here? As a, that kind of, and the whole quote unquote spell was broken with John Lennon, you know that song, I forgot what it is. You see, my mind is somewhere else, so I forget. When I go there, this is the interesting thing. When I go there, my mind operates outside the neural network. And that means the frequency information that belongs to the base program, this reality, I forget that. I forget what it's called. I have to go down in my neural network and then fetch that information. And I don't want to go there right now because I want to be in that memory of what I saw there and what I interpret there. So therefore, John Lennon or whatever, you know, the Imagination or whatever it's called, the most important song he ever made, that one snapped us out of it and we were back in our own reality. But there was this thickening of air, which I've experienced many times in Australia. Other experiences where time lapse happened, where later on I was living with another friend and we were out in the woods and we had that thickening, and he says to me, "That's weird, don't you feel this?" And then snap, 2 seconds later we were attacked by a swarm of mosquitoes and we had to run back home. But we had a time lapse, and I know we had a time lapse because when I came back home, I took an antihistamine because I don't respond well to mosquito bites, and I had 50 of them at least. And then I just went in and looked into what was going on. I had a severe headache, and I saw we had been taken on board crafts, and then we'd been put back in time, and that alteration in the frequency pattern attract the mosquitoes. So again, this whole kind of, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know what it's about unless we sense these subtle changes in the vibrational state of the atoms in the reality around us. In the mist, so to speak, of atoms, where we see how they change momentum, or they rotate in a different way, or they have a different spin, or however you want to put it, that changes our locality, as well as, you know, my story about when I was run over by a car, how that also changed, or when I fell down the stairs in Blue Mountains in Australia as well, how time was altered so I could stop and prevent myself from falling out the cliff and down and come and get really hurt and only stay on the steps. And I remember falling down thinking, this is odd, this is very slow, okay, I need to fall like that, oh, protect my head, I need to do this, that's odd, as this whole weird slow motion falling down as in some old movies from the 30s or something, right? So really weird experiences that shows me again and again, not as much anymore because we're now in the event program, but when we shifted from the old world order into the event program, there was all of these attempts to, I don't know if it was connected to the 70s of Australia. This is always how I interpret it, but I already had it beforehand, remember, of the platinum blonde woman in the SUV. But that was part of the Giza complex, actually, that type of groups that were what we call the new Nazis, the New World Order groups, right? So anyway, so it's just this coexisting that is happening is not in our interest, let me just put it this way. And the experimentations that are going on are not in our interest either. And yes, there are benevolent beings out there. There are definitely, when we talk in the outer, some of the rings of our perception field that are not what we call hostile, there are definitely also part of these outer realities, the otherworldly setups, where there are remnants of the original civilizations that are not malevolent in that understanding these science labs. When you go in there, you see the people that are working there. Are they malevolent? No, they are not. They are working around reptilians. Some of them are real reptilians. Some of them are re-engineered humans, as those of you who go far back with me in 2016, when I made that video on YouTube, Reptilian on My Table, which I took down because it's kind of, I don't know, I got hit by it and people were offended by it. They were not ready for that level of information yet. But how I was shown, again in the fourth dimension, I got a reptilian on my table, and I was trying I was working as a healer at the time, and he was dead. I was kind of, what am I to do with this? And it was just lying there on my table. I couldn't have clients lying on top of that fourth dimensional reptilian, right? So I was just figuring out what to do with this, and I didn't know what to do with it because it was a lesson. I needed to learn something. And it was not until, okay, I treated that body as if it were a client, and then I began healing on it. That didn't help because he was dead, but it was a replicate. But when I came to the head, and I put my hands on there, then was like it opened up a piece of technology, and then the reptilian shape shifted into human. And then I kind of, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then it was dispersed. Then it ceased to exist. And I still remember that technology, and I understood this is how they can take humans and make them look like reptilians if necessary. It's a holographic overlay that's built into the mind field. Because if that happens, if that's focused, they can, via mind control and that technology, shapeshift their molecular state from human into reptilian, which comes in handy when they are operating reptilian crafts. Goes without saying, right? And I also saw some of the in Sydney Bay, where you have Sydney Harbour, where you also have the military ships. There are military ships that have crafts in the fourth dimension on them. There are soldiers that are clones inside this reality that are not real beings, but they're positioned here as soldiers inside this reality. Their true version is in the adjacent realities. What is here is a clone. There is so much going on here. It's not just Australia, and all over the place. In different variations, all depending on what country you are living in and what type of original civilization that was built there, and the racial grids. And here in Denmark, we have a strong connection to some old Pleiadian grids, interestingly enough. Australia has that as well. That's the Maya Pleiadians, M-A-I-A. That's the star in the Maya constellation. But that's the Seven Sisters network, and that's the Fallen network. And that's not the original Pleiadian system. That's the one that were taken over by the Reptilians and the Orions, and they created the new Nordic race, as you know of. And that's the one that's in Australia. So, and I call them Maya Pleiadians. The rest of you call them Nordics, but that's because I'm looking at the point of origin. And then the Nordics have reptilian genetics in them. They also have Orion genetics in them. They have Pleiadian genetics. They are a hybrid race. In my opinion, others will see it differently. And they are like that. They're here also. And it's just, there's so much things that have been shown to me. And the question is, okay, what do I do with that information? At the time, it was as an invitation to become part of their project, right? I needed to know the sciences if they were to use me as a sort of quote unquote ambassador or a bridge into this reality, right? It's all about bridging into this reality. So how do we learn to bridge out of it? That's the challenge for us. How do we learn to bridge out of it? Not using all of this information, because all of this information I got here and what I'm sharing with you are part of projects that have been shut down. The 70s, they lost the battle to the Orions in the 2018 wars that took part in Australia, that shifted Australia from what they used to be into being more alignment with the Chinese, and that these groups of Orions that are operating in China and are in control of China. So Australia has now been aligned more with China than actually the West. But they have chosen to do so because America is also shifting from what they were at the time in 2017. That changed. So everything has changed from 2017 until now. And what I saw then is now historical. It's not what's going on now. Now something else is going on. but there are still groups down there that were when I was there, but they are no longer free to do what they want to do, so to speak. What I got when I got there in 17, and how Australia was when I left in 2000, late 2018, in the beginning of 2019, was a completely different scenario. It was completely different. Everything changed into a darker version, let's just put it like that, like the rest of the world after we had the gravitational wave in August 2017 that began rippling in patterns of the dark energies in alignment with the dark or black holes of the third cycle, pulling that into our reality on a grand scale, which is now being attempted to be reversed so we can align with what we call more prosperous reality fields and not being sucked into the dark wells of the third cycle. That's another discussion that I don't want to put here. But what I want to put here is to say, okay, we are now looking into perhaps the worst cases of darkening is over, other than what we will deal with. If everybody learned to deal with the dark orbs, for instance, that are floating around in nighttime, and the night crawlers and the underworld stuff, and that's the old racial grids and whatever's on a molecular level that keeps us stuck in here, and do the progression work as we're supposed to, we have two options. Either we realign so much with the original worlds that once we shed off this physical form, we'll drawn out through the network, which is networks that connects the different realities, and which are part of the original restoration program before the hijacking, and that's the progression work I share. And then there's the other one, and that's the one I'm focusing on right now, is having that discussion, putting my mind to it, and beginning to push them. As in kind of, they say, yeah, you're not allowed to go here, but I know they're humans like you and me. They're from the same original civilizations that used to be here. The rise and fall of civilization is not a new thing. And our current civilization, even though it's inside the pocket or whatever's going on, the rise and fall of civilizations inside the pocket, as it was completely enclosed during the hijacking 12,500 years ago, it wasn't always like that. And the other worlds are here still, but we're being prevented from accessing it. That's what people call the veil is falling down. But it's just as much us that needs to take that responsibility and go in and say, hey, we can change that. But I also know they're afraid of letting us do that, because if we can do that, then the really nasty souls that are here too can do that too. And I would say, well, why don't you go in and take care of these nasty souls? That's some of the things I've been trying to take down, the technology and the writing in and the programs and the crystal disc that allows these nasty things to be here. That's been part of some of the really shitty work I've been doing as the last couple of years as well. So that we could say, well, the rest of the human population actually has potentials to do the transition. Shouldn't we focus on what can be done for the original civilizations that are now embedded into this physical form? I'm not talking about 60% clones. They are what they are. They are fill out to keep up the program. They are maintaining the program by thinking about it every day, by living their desires every day, keeping up the collective emotional field and the collective mind field that keeps the rest of us stuck in this configuration. Even though we try to break it, there's still 60%, right? That's above average. That's above the 50%. That's the momentum that keeps this reality going. So step 1, get rid of the really nasty souls. Step 2, don't let the insectoids get into the clones. Stop them from trying to make them actual living beings. Of course, you could see if that happens, well, then that would shift us into the 4th dimension. So perhaps that's the plan. I don't know. But there's definitely some miss out, and that's where I kind of feel they have an interest in keeping us stuck in worlds where we don't take our full potentials, or where we can't take our full potentials into action. For me, it feels as if they are deliberately not looking at us as living beings. They're looking at us as we are looking at animals, that are a part of science labs. They don't want to see us as real living beings, similarly as people that are working, scientists that are working with test animals. They disconnect. They don't see it as an actual being that feels pain, that is afraid, that looks up when they use these little nice puppies, the beagles, looking up with their big brown eyes and saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" If they had a little bit of heart and connected to the animal, they would see that the animals are suffering. But they are closing that down because they say it's for the betterment of humanity. We need to do this so we can find the right gene sequence so that we can save humanity. And I'm pretty sure the ones on the other side are saying the exact same bullshit. Instead of looking at what are we dealing with here, we're dealing with living, sentient, feeling, sensing, living life forms that has a purpose, that used to have an original purpose and function in the greater scheme of things. And who are they to decide that we are not worthy of becoming our full potentials? Who are they to decide that they have the right to keep us stuck inside the rehabilitation programs? Similarly, as I would also say, for me, animals are not to be tested on. That is an abomination and should stop immediately, the exploitation of another life form. And it's against all the rules of any civilization that you use another life form to test on, to exploit, or to use for your own gratification, or to still your own desires, or whatever objectification that is going on, minimizing the idea of the other being a living, sentient, sensing being that feels the effect of what's being done to it and suffers traumatically because of it. And I think that's one of the things that those of us who are doing this, aside from fighting to maintain ourselves and keeping ourselves sane, those of us who are part of the psychological, psychotronic warfare constantly going on, is at some point try to get through to these people and say, hey, seriously, where's the brother sisterhood? What has happened between us being a joint race? But clearly they are looking at us as a sub-race, as primitives, as underdeveloped, as contaminated. And I think that's the biggest problem in all of this. So my challenge to you that are listening to this, prove them wrong. Do the progression work, undo your contamination, upgrade your science skills, develop the understanding of the true rules and principles and the laws of the reality you're actually a part of. Become what they don't see us as. Similarly, as if animals, if they could start talking, there probably still would be scientists that, yeah, fuck that, because they're already doing that to humans. They probably have in other parts of the more secret levels of our pocket reality, there are probably scientists experimenting on humans, for sure. We know that. It's been done. Secretly or covertly or openly, humans have been experimented on as well. So there are these malicious people inside this reality, for sure. Let's get rid of these. And the rest, that, and when I say rid, is kind of, give them a reality where they can do their malicious stuff to each other. And then find a way to create a world where those of us who actually want to do good, actually want to progress, actually want to develop ourselves, give us that reality where we can do that. Let that happen. Take the high road, people. Instead of constantly creating excuses for why we should be kept in this state that we are in, when everything points in the direction of there is definitely a huge portion of humanity that is ready and that should be given that free choice to progress and to develop into what we truly are. And that is a very highly advanced civilization, because we have the potentials. It's in our configuration. But of course, if we get constantly bogged down and psychotronically altered by all sorts of perversion programs, it's difficult to prove that we actually have the configuration that is so similar to theirs because we used to be brothers and sisters once. So I think that's one of the things I wanted to share in this one. Thank you.